Hey, college sports fans, I don't know how edgy our commentary will be, but we are going to go through defensive ends. Boo me. Trying to delete it. We're going to go through defensive ends as we approach the 2025 season. We are going to take a look not only at the room coming up and how things are going to look a little bit bolstered talent wise, shall we say, but also we're going to look at some of the best of all time. I'm Bill Zimmerman, and this is the Reign Supreme Always podcast season
Four.
4.
I'm Daniel Shirley, and I don't want to boo you on our own podcast, but I almost have to. We've known each other a long time. I've never booed you. I want to start doing it now, so don't do that again. But no, it's fun. I love what we're doing. I love, and you and I we're about the same age. We graduated together the same day, right?
Yep.
And went to school together for 3 4 years, and uh, so we've watched this program for a long time, and it is fun to look back on the era of Clemson teams that we grew up on, and then this current era that has taken the program to a new level. Right? It is a different. I mean, you can't even deny that. You can't argue that. What Danny Ford did was great, right? And then there
Yeah.
was, as Dabo Swinney said at the time, wandering in the desert for many many years before they became what they have become now. So uh, it is fun to kind of look at all these eras as we've been, following Clemson football for a long, long time.
Yep. And there's people who've been watching it longer than us out there, and I hope they
Absolutely.
will chime in and add in some of the names that sort of predate when we've been watching things for the Tigers. But I do also like thinking as we at some point in this episode, and like the defensive tackle one we did already, ClemsonKickoff.com or YouTube.com/ClemsonKickoff. You can go find it there and take a look at it. I like thinking about, hey, who on this team is going to have a chance to rise to this level? And I don't think there will be a lot of guys kind of moving all the way up to the top of the list, but this episode might have one who we're going to look at. So we'll see how that goes. But I do want to also remind people that this is not in like a ranking of number 10 up to number one. That we kind of do it in two groups. Like, hey, here are some guys who are almost in that like true upper echelon. And a lot of those guys are really, really good because of this rich history of Clemson, especially those defensive tackles for sure. And then we kind of got in a group of four in no particular order above that. So we'll go ahead and start moving through this. Be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. It's free. It's the best place to catch all our episodes, and it's the best place for you to comment with your reactions. And one of the guys, let's go ahead and back up. I think you remember him better than I do, especially being a Niners fan. Is we'll start with Jeff Bryant.
Yeah, Jeff Bryant was a really good player. On those teams that were really good, right? In us my growing up era, I remember number 99 playing for the Tigers, and he was a key piece of that team becoming what it could become in 81 and winning a championship. And again a little bit before that too, right? I know the 80 team wasn't quite as good, but the couple of teams before that. So in my mind, Bill, just from watching Clemson football since I was 5 years old, he kind of set the bar at defensive end. Now there's been others, right? There were some. I'm sure, as you said, there'll be others before that. There've been others since, and there will be others to come. But if you look at these other names that are just listed there, and I don't want to get into the ones that are to come, but if you look at a Shaq Lawson, or you look at a Austin Bryant, or a Myles Murphy, and I know Trevor Price was only there 1 year, Jeff Bryant kind of set the bar for what defensive end is at Clemson, and these other guys have come after that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bryant, it's as I mentioned in the previous episode, it's tough to find defensive stats on these guys that come from sort of a previous era of NCAA stat keeping, so to speak. But he was a first round draft pick, which I had not realized until I looked this up. I'm sure you knew that, given your favorite pro team is who picked him up at some
Oh,
point.
oh, 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 hold on. He was drafted by the Seahawks.
He was drafted by the Seahawks, but he did end up playing for the Niners.
Yes.
So you knew who he had that background. So
Yes.
first round draft pick, 19 tackles for loss just for that 1981 title team. So very impressive ability. And you think about that era, like there weren't the opportunities that there are now, right? Like guys weren't snapping the ball 60, 70, 80 times a game back
Right.
then. So
Right. It was a
uh,
different era for sure. Different kind of
abs
game.
absolutely. You look at Myles Murphy, and he played in that super fast kind of game. I don't know that he ever had the sack totals that we expected from him. He was always like not even a half step, like he was like a quarter step away from getting those sacks. But he had a
Yep.
ton of pressures for sure. 139 tackles overall for Myles Murphy, a first round draft pick. 37 tackles for loss. Very, very productive. Super stout against the run, without a doubt. Set the edge like few have at Clemson. 17 and a half sacks in his 3 seasons. So no slouch there. Six forced fumbles. There I go, fumbling a fumble line again, just like the last episode, and then 6 pass breakups. So capable of getting his arms in the air. Someone who I always liked watching, and then the last thing I saw out of him was spectacular in a very different way. But Shaq Lawson, 2013 to 15, first team All American, first round draft pick, went to Buffalo, 167 tackles, 46 and a half tackles for loss with 20 sacks, 29 QB pressures. And the thing I remember most about him, and uh, he when he got hurt against Oklahoma in that semifinal going in the 2015 season, 2016 playoff, and Austin Bryant was sort of pressed into service, and took him a few minutes to step up. But Lawson, after that game, and I was down near one of the end zones, just stood in that end zone and reaching up to the stands and like signing stuff, talking to people, shaking hands, like not just doing like the sign it and toss it back. Like he was really being genuine about that. Big bag of ice on his knee. I think it was his knee the whole time. You
Yep.
could see he wasn't getting around all that great, but just that time he took with those fans, it really showed you the kind of person he is. And by all accounts, I would say that his younger brother, who's on the team, matches that description right now. And then I'll quickly mention Bryant's stats because he sure went on to bigger and better things, and it really started in the second half of that game after he got his sea legs under him. First team All American, 153 tackles, 35 tackles for loss with 20 sacks, and then 32 QB pressures for him. And then you did mention Price is on this list that we came up with. Even though he was just 1 season, came here from Michigan, so the opposite motion of Trey Williams, most of his time leaving that defensive tackle room and going on to Michigan, if I remember correctly. That's where he transferred out to. But Price, after he got here, he did become a first round draft pick. He had 20 tackles for loss in that season and 7.5 sacks. So really, really capable bunch right there. And then if I can just get my keyboard to work, there we go. So in that other group, that sort of elevated group of four in no particular order, the first one we'll mention is Cleveland Furl. He was here 2016-18. I believe he redshirted in 2015, if I'm not mistaken,
Seems
or
like, yeah.
and I know he redshirted. I just don't remember if it was 15 or 16. Went on to 27 sacks in his time on the field, 165 tackles, 51 tackles for loss. Just again, everything you would want out of a defensive end, and uh, able to disrupt the passing game like crazy, but he did not really lose ground in the running game in college either.
No, remember the game he had against Ohio State in the semifinal of that first year when they won the
Yeah,
championship? He might have been the best player on the field
yeah,
against Ohio State. And I remember, was it the first drive? Clemson throws the pick, and Ohio State's got a short field, and he makes a play. Tackle for loss. They lose some yardage. They miss the field goal.
right.
He had several plays like that. He had a sack, and then remember the play he had on fourth down against Alabama in the red zone in the second championship game,
That's right.
right?
Yep.
So where he tackles Tua for a tackle for loss, it just kind of sealed the win. Yeah, I know it was a 28-point game in the fourth quarter, but that kind of put it away. So look, I'm a big fan of Cleveland. I think he had a great career. Um, did a lot of good things for the Tigers. I don't know that he was a huge recruit, right? We've talked about some guys being uh, kind of lesser stars as we talked about Grady Jarrett on the last episode.
Star
I don't,
ratings coming in,
yeah,
yeah.
star ratings. I don't think Cleveland was a huge recruit, if I'm remembering correctly. He was a really good player, and had
He's
a
out of
great career.
Virginia, state of Virginia, maybe.
I believe so,
Yeah,
yeah. And I mean, it's, I don't know that he was he was out of Richmond. I don't know that he was a big time, you know, name coming out, but you look at what he did. He redshirted, and like you said, 2015 when he redshirted
okay.
and played 3 really good years with the Tigers, and has had a solid NFL career. And Bill, another name on this list before we move on, I know we want to move on, and I didn't mean to wave my hand in front of the camera like that. Is I think Austin Bryant's underrated, right? On what
Yeah,
he meant. They played together. There was a lot of good things there. So I think you have to look at Cleveland and Austin Bryant and the two, and we mentioned Dexter Lawrence and Christian Wilkins in the last episode. I think you kind of have to tie all of them together. But Cleveland was a great player, did a lot of good things at Clemson, won 2 national titles, and was a key piece to 2 national title teams. Got hurt against Alabama in the first championship game. Remember when he made the tackle in the second half and got hurt and had to come out of that game. But look, just a great player for Clemson and did a lot of great things.
absolutely. I mean, if you're making a list like this at a school like Clemson, I will say it, a true blue blood of college football. I think they've earned that at this point. Our alma mater has earned that. Maybe I'm biased. If you're making a list like this where there's 9 guys on it, you've done a lot of good things because there have been some pretty fantastic defensive ends and defensive linemen overall to come through the program.
Well, and I was having a discussion with some friends about something else today, and there was hey, he's top 10. And why do people take that as a criticism? Think about how many players have played at Clemson and played defensive end at Clemson, and we're talking about you being a top 10
Yeah,
kind of a guy. I don't think, no, it's very high praise, including for Vic Beasley, the
yeah,
next name on the list. I mean, Vic Beasley, again, this is what they did at Clemson. Vic Beasley did not have as good of a pro career as I thought he was going to have, but he was a heck of a college football player.
mhm,
Heck of a player. And Bill, you also, it's kind of in this current era of Clemson football. I know that the teams in 16 and 18 won the title and all those playoff teams that came after them. You kind of have to look at a guy like Vic Beasley in that 11 to 14 era that they built what those other teams came behind them, right? They built the foundation of what those other teams could be. So, and we've heard Dabo say that even after the first championship, he said this is for all those teams, right?
yeah,
And Vic Beasley is part of that group. Vic Beasley had a great college career. It didn't translate to the NFL, but he was a tremendous college football player.
yeah. And he had a strong season here and there, in the NFL. No, right.
He had a great year with the Falcons, right? One
Yeah,
great year. Yeah.
timed it perfectly to cash in on that as
Yes.
well. And he made his impact. He was a little more one dimensional when he got to the NFL, I would say. That stopping the run game at defensive end in the NFL is a different challenge, and especially as they've moved to more four-man fronts in the NFL. But just in college, all over the field, and you can say that about him and the next 2 guys we're going to bring up, like as you put it, just absolute game changers. I remember Ben Boulware also talking about that, like all the guys that came before him and just running off name after name after name, and Beasley being one of those. And of course, Boulware now back on campus as a linebackers coach. So good to see those things happen. But Beasley was appointment viewing. Like some of those teams in that era leading up to Dabo Sweeney's truly uh, elevating the program, right, and getting it back to that true uh, blue chip status, if you will, and really doing those final steps to make Clemson a blue blood, if you ask me. Beasley was one of those guys that even my buddies up in the Midwest or my buddies down here in Florida or what have you, like they weren't big Clemson fans, and Clemson wasn't, really on TV much before you started getting guys like Sammy Watkins, before you start getting guys like Nuke Hopkins, before you start getting the Thunder and Lightning with Davis and Spiller. And Beasley was one of those guys that they were like, gosh, he's tremendous to watch. I may have substituted the 4-letter word gosh for other 4-letter words that I was hearing about guys like that.
Connect with us on social media. That's at Clemson Kickoff. Whether you're on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, or Facebook, you'll find us there.
So
this is a family podcast. Be careful.
That's right. And so we'll move into Gaines Adams, another one of those guys that came along earlier than that, and the late Gaines Adams at that, rest in peace. But 03 to 06, and you talk about, you talked in the last, well, you talked about Jeff Bryant in the last group, kind of setting the bar. And I think Gaines Adams may have been one who really raised it and significantly and said, here's what you can do if you're a defensive end at Clemson. So 168 tackles, 44 and a half for loss, 28 sacks. Just absolutely. Was he the one who had that big play at Wake Forest?
I was just going to mention that.
There you go.
We talked earlier, or maybe in the last episode, about remembering one play. Yeah, because we were talking about Chester McLaughlin. If you bring up Gaines Adams and you're a real Clemson fan, you remember the play against Wake Forest, right? Where they were in trouble the whole game. I mean, they're going to lose that game. It felt like the entire game, like it felt like they were going to lose that game. And he makes the play to win the game. And, again, it almost feels like Bill, like we almost got cheated out of what he could have been. Imagine Brent Venables working with Gaines Adams.
Oh my goodness.
Right. I mean, or somebody like that, right? Like he came along just in the wrong era of Clemson football. That was a rough era of Clemson football that time. I mean, they weren't awful. They were just kind of meh, and
Right.
they would win a game they weren't supposed to win and then lose two after that they weren't supposed to lose. And you just feel like, man, if he'd have come along in the 80s with Danny Ford, or if he'd have come on later with Dabo and Brent Venables, what could he have been? But he was a tremendous player, even during that difficult era for Clemson football.
Absolutely. And then, someone who kind of picked up the mantle after a year in between, Daquan Bowers. And I'll tell you what, we talked about, hey, no particular order, but if you come back to Clemson and you're an assistant coach, there's a good chance you're going to get to be on top of the list if we're doing it in no particular order, right? So Bowers, I love seeing him on social media, just really energetic there as an assistant. And from 08 to 2010, 179 tackles, 47 quarterback pressures, 19 and a half sacks. Just I could go on and on. I think he had six pass breakups, a record 9 straight games involved in a sack. What more do you say? And he was not exactly someone who you could exploit with the run game and negate his abilities against the pass.
It felt like he was a complete player, right? I think you look at this list. I think Gaines Adams was that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think Farrell was that way, right? Not just a pass rusher at defensive end. Maybe Vic Beasley was more of a pass rusher, but Daquan Bowers was a complete defensive end. I mean, just look at that picture of him. I mean, that is a prototypical what you want a defensive end to look like in a 4-3 defense. So was a tremendous player. He's done a tremendous job at Clemson as an assistant coach. He left for a couple of years, went to South Florida with Jeff Scott. Now he's back, or he's been back for a little bit to work on the staff. He's assistant defensive ends coach. Probably grooming him to eventually take over to be the lead defensive ends coach at whatever time that comes. But he was a really, really good player and has done a really good job as an assistant as well.
Yeah, someone you definitely want to come back and be a part of your program, and just excellent. See, I mean, you look up and down this list. Like if we were trying to rank these guys 1 through 9 as it stands now, I don't know how we'd pick a 1. Like
you do it. I'm not doing it.
Like we'd have to get it. It's literally one of those things where, if you take 9 different people, you're going to get 5 or 6 different answers. Like you have to gather up people and take a poll. And it speaks a lot to why it will. I guess we'll start to segue in. I'll hit stop share here. We'll start to segue into our 2025 preview of what the defensive end room is going to look like. How do you get a guy like TJ Parker to come to Clemson from the state of Alabama at a point where Nick Saban was still coaching, and still recruiting, and just that defensive line was so dominant there? Auburn always a factor for anybody in the state of Alabama. The whole SEC really is a factor with everybody in the state. And you get TJ Parker and Peter Woods to come in the same year. Well, it's because of a list like we just saw, Bowers, Adams, Beasley, Farrell, Bryant, Price, Bryant, Lawson, Murphy. When you see those names and that track record of production, you know that you're going to get good coaching here, and you're going to get excellent visibility to move on to the next step. And I think TJ Parker has a chance. I mean, there was a gap on that list that we had on the screen. I think I could just type that in. He'd fit in there very neatly if he can have the kind of junior year that he's capable of. I know he got tripped up a little by migraines starting the season last year. Really rounded into form though, and was looking like a true advancement of the splash on the scene that he made as a freshman when you and I were like, thank goodness we've got this guy at defensive end, because what's there if they don't have Parker?
Well, if you've had a migraine, you know that it's not just a bad headache. I mean, it's a serious thing with all the vision stuff that goes on with it. The nausea, I get them. I get them every once in a while. I haven't had one in a while, thank goodness. But those are nothing to take lightly. And look, even with that, Bill, I mean, look at the improvement over year one to year two: 32 tackles to 57 tackles. Tackles for loss, 20 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
In a college football season is a lot. He had 11 sacks last year. He had 5.5 his first year. So that's the progression. Now, is he going to keep doubling his numbers? Let's hope so. Hey, we could go for 20 sacks this year and 40 tackles for loss. Yeah. That's a little too much to ask for somebody, but boy, he's a good player. And he was a big time recruit. He maybe got overshadowed a little bit by Peter Woods. But he has had a huge impact on this team, and you love the progression that you saw from him from freshman year to the sophomore year. Because I don't know that I expected him to take quite that jump last year. Right? Like if you'd have told me he was going to go from 5.5 sacks to 11 sacks by the end of his career, hey, sign me up for that. I'll take that. But he really took that step in 1 year. Now let's see if he can take another big step this year, because he's going to be a big piece of the puzzle for Tom Allen and that new defense and everything that they want to get done this year. There's a reason. I mean, I've seen him as a top 5 pick in the draft next year, right? So, I mean, there's a reason people are looking at him like that. It's the talent. It's everything that goes along with it. But he showed some work ethic from year one to year two. Bill, you don't make that jump just because you're a talent.
Yeah.
Right. You've got to work to make that jump. And he did that last year, and hopefully that'll continue this year.
Yeah. One of the guys who, I always talk about the sophomore slump, and I feel like it's one of those it's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's very often true. A lot of guys, even Sammy Watkins kind of had the sophomore slump. Maybe at some point in the year, Avion Terrell you saw it at corner out of him a little bit. I think early in the year you saw it with Khalil Barnes, and I think those last two guys I mentioned are guys who work hard and put in all the hours. And Barnes talked about how it was, the adjustment of moving from one spot in the field to another. But I do think there are times where, aside from those two, you've got guys who came out of that big freshman splash, and they've made it through high school on talent alone in a lot of those cases, and they come to college and they put the work in because they know they can't do it on talent alone. But suddenly they think they're all set, and they had that big freshman year. They think like they put in all the work they had to put in. They still got it, and it sort of hits them kind of hard, that sophomore year. They got to figure some things out again. And to see TJ Parker not only boost those numbers, but with some reduced snaps while fighting through some physical troubles. I mean, that just to me really cements like, okay, here's a guy you can count on. And this year, uh, whereas from freshman to sophomore year, he'd had Xavier Thomas on the other side as a freshman, didn't have that as a sophomore, still pulled this off. Now he's got a new face who may be opposite him many a day in Will Heldt out of Purdue. And I finally had a chance to go to Cam Randall Stadium up in Wisconsin, see a game last year. I've had some friends up there bugging me to come up and watch a game there. Wonderful atmosphere. Highly recommend it. Madison is a great town. And there were two guys I saw buzzing all over the field, and Helt was one of them, and there was a linebacker who was the other. So out of the blue, obviously I'm not sitting there thinking in the stands, gosh, I hope he transfers to Clemson next year, but he did, and I'm really interested to see what Tom Allen can do to integrate him quickly. I think Helt is stout enough to do well against the run as well as against the pass. He may be sort of that Austin Bryant cloth of that dual purpose, able to get it both done, maybe not be the lead guy, but be very capable out there, long as he doesn't get helped too often by opposing line. Sorry.
Well, we'll see how the referee. Well, I told you I was going to boo you. Now you're going to make me boo you. No, and
Hey, check out our website, clemsonkickoff.com. It's got kickoff times. It's got archives of episodes and blogs, some offers. It's a simple resource for you.
Bill, a little bit before we go to Will, you mentioned you also become, if you have a good freshman year, there's tape on you now, right?
Yeah.
And you become part of the game plan.
Super
right?
point. Yep.
So as opposed to where you might have flown under the radar a little bit, but when coaches didn't know who you were, the opposing coaches, now the coaches know who you are. But to the thing about Will Heldt is he's a complete player. Like you remember when we were just talking about Bowers and Gaines Adams and those guys who were run stoppers too. He's that kind of big body kind of a guy who's not just a pass rusher.
Yeah.
So, and this is a veteran group up front, right? If you look at across the board with defensive tackles and defensive ends. So
Yeah.
I like the 1-2 combination of Parker and Heldt. And, I know they're a little thin behind them, but look, I'll tell you a guy that I really like who's now a junior is Jaheim Lawson.
Oh, yeah.
He has played well since he's been at Clemson. Is he the superstar, going to get you 10 sacks in a season? No, maybe not. But he is a really solid depth guy. And this is a position where they were really thin last year. Yeah. And they're not super deep with this group, but they have more depth this year than they had last year.
Yeah, I love Lawson as that third option. I think if someone had told me before the season that Jaheim Lawson would be a key player to this defense, I would have thought, ooh, that's going to be a learning experience, right? But he really stepped up, figured a lot of things out, meshed well with then new coach Chris Rumph, and really got some things figured out. And aside from Lawson and of course Parker, we didn't see a ton of advancement from the defensive ends with that first year with Rumph leading the room. But we may see that now. I mean, I've seen some rumblings about Cade Denoff and conditioning, and you would love for that to pan out to be true. Sometimes that just pans out to be off-season chatter and things to talk about. But if that makes an impact, Denoff is another one. He's built very similarly to Will Heldt. He's built kind of similar. Well, I won't go as far as Daquan Bowers, but
wouldn't we all want to be built like Daquan Bowers? That would
good
be
golly. That'd make DIY around the house a lot easier,
yes,
wouldn't it?
Would.
Yes,
it would.
I wouldn't feel so embarrassed taking my walks in the neighborhood. A 287-yard drive would be my short drive of the day when I'm getting 18 holes in, but to be young and blessed with a stronger physique, who knows? But suddenly I look at that trio of Parker, Heldt, Lawson, and even Denoff, and then you got some young guys coming into the picture as well, who will have the opportunity to crack that too deep. There's no doubt. But Lawson gave me a lot of confidence. Again, when he's related to the one of the guys on your all-time list and Shaq Lawson, he certainly understands like what it takes, right? He didn't come in with the height and weight that Shaq Lawson came into out of Daniel High School, coming on the campus, but he has made up for it, I think, with that same work ethic that his older brother had on campus. And so, if you got three, you're pretty good. And then there's another wild card, and hopefully you got those young guys ready to talk about as well, because I do not. But the one wild card would be Jeremiah Alexander. We'll talk more about him at linebacker because I think that's where he's going to factor in more prominently. I think most people, that's the conventional wisdom there. But he did spend a little time with the ends at Alabama before transferring to Clemson. If they had to make that move, they could. So options behind the two clear, who I think are the two clear starters.
Yeah, options. And I think it might have been on TigerNet. I hope I'm giving them the correct credit, where there was a story about that they can be creative with him.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that was TigerNet. So
Meaning Alexander.
if not, I apologize. But it was Jeremiah Alexander, and rush the passer, right, with him. He's a middle linebacker, whatever he's going to be, but let him go rush the passer, because he is that kind of talent. And so I think he gives you another option there. I think Ari Watford gives you an option.
Yeah.
True freshman. Dabo was talking about Darian Mayo the other day. I think he's a guy as a redshirt freshman that gives you some options as well. So look, Bill, I mean, if you look at it, we're talking, 2, 4, 6, 7 guys deep right there that maybe we weren't talking about 7 last year, right? Where we might have been talking 3 or 4 or maybe 3. And that's why Peter Woods had to play on the outside a little bit. And, so I think they do at least, maybe you can unleash Sammy Brown some to rush the passer too, right? From the outside, or Wade Woodaz or blitz or whatever Tom Allen's going to do. I do think you've got some more options to get after the passer. And that's certainly something they need to get back to, right? That was a staple of Brent Venables as the defense coordinator. You heard the stat anytime they played a big game is, Clemson's right up there with the national leaders in sacks, right? And even if you're not getting sacks, you're putting pressure on the opposing quarterback and making them make quick, bad decisions. That's what you need to do. So, no, I like the 2 transfers really helped this defense, because where would they be without Will Heldt and Jeremiah Alexander? We'd have a lot more questions about this defense than we do right now. There's no doubt about that.
For sure. And a couple of things that I'll be interested to see is, how is Tom Allen going to use defensive end? Like we've talked in the past about, defensive end sometimes is focused on setting the edge rather than pass rushing, focused on the run game instead of the pass. Sometimes they're dropping into coverage on a matchup that isn't too favorable to the offense, at least, and picking someone up so that someone else is moving in to either rush the passer or to set the edge. And, you'll even see, corners sometimes being asked to set the edge, and you move that defensive end back, and you have to have the right matchups to make that work. Like that's not a regular thing, but I can remember as far back as Corey Crawford, you'd see him sometimes kicking outside and playing some end. And then, he was so versatile, like he was capable of doing it, but even played in up the middle at times as well. So will Tom Allen still ask that, or will he try to simplify things with, 2 clear-cut starters and then a little murkier picture beyond those 2 guys, especially if someone else were to be pressed into more service, shall we say? I don't want to bring up the I word, but we'll see how that goes. And then
we know people are going to get dinged up, right? So that's why you have to have depth. And Bill, I mean, you make a great point. This is a new defensive plan, and we don't know exactly what it will look like. You can kind of look back at his time at Indiana and as the head coach, and you definitely can look at the time at Penn State as the defensive coordinator and see, what he's done. But I mean, he's going to, as all good coaches do, he's going to build his plan around the talent and use the best players that he has.
Right.
And again, that I thought it was time for a change as a defense coordinator. I think I've made it clear. I've said it here on the podcast, and in much cleaner language than I said on our text threads. But you have to feel, or at least I do, way more comfortable about the defense with Tom Allen running the show. Look, and that's not a shot at Wes Goodwin. Tom Allen has done it at this level, at a high level before, and Wes Goodwin really hasn't. And you think that a Tom Allen can look at these pieces and okay, where do they fit in the puzzle, and how can I affect the opposing team at the highest level? And I think that's what you'll see from him.
Yeah, and we're almost out of time here on our recording plan, but I will say real quick, they've got to do a better job of setting the edge against the run. They've got to have better run integrity this year than they showed last year, by hook or by crook. And Tom Allen, coming from the Big Ten, should be able to address that, see what's needed, and address those weaknesses wherever they may be, whoever they may be. And that's got to be a priority over, hey, how often do we want to drop him into coverage against a slow tight end or something like that? So we will see how that goes, and they'll find out very quickly against LSU what they're capable of and what they're not in that season opener, and then try to work on it against Troy, who sometimes that's no slouch of a program either. So I hope that everyone is enjoying the way we're setting this up. We're going to keep going. We've got 8 more position groups to go through. Maybe we'll get special teams before the start of the season. Maybe not. We'll play that by ear. But we are going to keep cruising through these. And then, of course, as preseason news starts to break, we'll jump in with that as well. So until our next episode, probably those linebackers, I'm guessing. I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.